Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Monday, the 19th of June. And joining me on this edition, our audio reviewer, Ed Selley.
It's a low neighbourhood full of rum pots.
Assistant editor, Steve Withers.
They may be drinkers, Robin, but they're still human beings.
And special guest, Mark Botwright.
Holy bikini.
Welcome back to the podcast. We've been off on our holiday, well, some of us have been off on our holidays up to sunny Scotland where it rained continuously. But I did manage, Ed, to do some of the North Coast 500, which is the route which takes you from Inverness across to Applecross and then up the west coast along the top to John O'Groats and then down the east side back to Inverness again. Only did part of it. I didn't have time to do the whole 500, but I did about 220 in one day, 6 hours. So I went up the west coast, had my lunch in Lochinver and then cut across country. So I didn't go all the way up to John O'Groats and seemingly it's boring. There's not a lot to look at. The west coast's where all the scenery is. So I did that and then across and back down and it averaged 26 miles to the gallon.
That suggests to me that you weren't trying hard enough.
Like I say, it was wet. in a high performance rear wheel drive car that likes to break its back end and do silly things, I had to take it easy in some stretches. Although the stretch to Lochinver was dry, and that's a nice sweeping road. If anybody goes up there, I definitely recommend it. You have to come back on yourself. It's like a dead end road. It goes out to Lochinver and then it comes back in again. It's a nice sweeping road, lots of nice flowing corners, and you even get a ruined castle to stop and look at as well on your way in there. So highly recommend that if anybody does that. So we've had 2 weeks off. What have you been doing, Steve?
Working.
Now come on. You don't work at the best of times. So
this hinges on whether watching televisions is work, doesn't it? We've had this conversation on many.
Quite a lot of tellies. I also got a Limitless card at the Odeon to replace my Cineworld Unlimited card.
Yeah.
And given that a spanking. So
I've done the same this week, so I'm sure we'll discuss this when we come up to the movie film roundup section. I've managed to see a couple of films. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see the classic, which is Baywatch, yet.
I think you'd have enjoyed that more than you enjoyed The Mummy.
Probably, but we'll come on to that a little bit later on. Ed, what have you been up to for the last few?
Well, I don't know if you noticed, I actually did a review and put it up before the end of the month.
I did notice that, yeah.
Yeah, so there was that. I have been reviewing like mad. I've been watching the Le Mans qualifying. It's Le Mans this weekend. We'll probably cover that a bit later on. It's a nice sunny day. So naturally, I'm stuck indoors with some headphones on. So that's how it works.
With Le Mans, I take it we just hand it over to Porsche straight away.
Yeah. No, not at all.
No? There's actually some competition now that Audi's gone.
Well, if you remember, Toyota had it in the bag last year. They just had a mechanical failure on the last lap, real sort of Hollywood style. This time round, it's forecast to be dry, which favours the Toyota. They've got 3 cars, which is also an advantage. And it appears to be a relatively simple. It's all on a race that lasts 24 hours. It appears to be less fatiguing to drive over long periods of time than the Porsche does. So now having said all that, we can sit back and watch Porsche win. But the money is on Toyota at this point. Time you listen to this, obviously it'll have been done and dusted. So I hope that people who watched it with me enjoyed it. All I would say is that it's in terms of just the level of quality that goes into the filming of it, it's beautifully captured. It's always one of my televisual highlights of the year, and as and when HDR and the likes finally makes it down the pecking order to people like Discovery and Eurosport, HDR for the night sequences of Le Mans is just going to look absolutely ridiculous.
Right, previous competitions. Let's do the winners first, and then we'll go into active competition. So who's won, Mark?
Sparkitus 69, nice. Won Underworld Blood Wars on Blu-ray, and Simon Blue won Why Him on Blu-ray as well.
Okay, and our current competitions that are actually live and where people can win stuff when this goes out on Monday?
Yep, we've got an EE4G Action Cam and Viewfinder watch courtesy of Scan, and that one's open to all eligible members living in the UK, Ireland and Isle of Man, and it runs till 29th of June. Okay,
that's cool. And let's move on. Ed, you've had a pair of speakers from Q Acoustics, and normally they are the budget kings when it comes to quality loudspeakers at a very reasonable price. However, this pair come in at £4,000, so explain.
Yes. This is the Q Acoustics Concept 500. I went along to the press launch late last year. At that point, it was only £3,600, but there's been some last minute changes due to our
Brexit.
Due to our fluctuating currency. Let's leave it at that. This is Q Acoustics letting its hair down, so to speak. Interestingly, having spoken to a senior member of the company, the only stipulation they were given is that it had to cost less than £10,000. They topped out at 4, and that's that's within the constraints of what they were doing. That's as far as they felt they needed to go.
But I need to understand the reasoning for this, Ed. Do they want to move the brand up market? Is this the whole push, or is this just them saying, look, we can do high end as well, we're not just a budget manufacturer?
Both, I think, is the solid answer to that. I don't believe that Q Acoustics expects this to sell by the hundreds of thousands. That's just the nature of these things. But it will have a halo effect, and they've confirmed that in the fullness of time it will spawn other models. But it's a damn sight easier to now replace, say, the existing Concept 20 and Concept 40 with a more expensive speaker, having already demonstrated that they're capable of going quite a long way up the pecking order and building something like this. And it's obviously the review covers this in a reasonable amount of depth. What's pretty impressive is that this is still a Q Acoustic speaker. It uses the same driver materials, the same basic layout. It uses technology that we've seen before. It just essentially spinal taps it. It turns everything up to 11. And there are certain things it does. If you haven't read the review, I wound up issuing it only the second 10 out of 10 I've ever issued for AVForums, and a reference badge. The point being is that I've listened to a fair few pairs of loudspeakers under £10,000, and in this room, with similar equipment, only one at, as near as makes no difference, £10,000 demonstrated attributes that were recognisably superior to this. There is nothing under £5,000 which is objectively more capable than what Q Acoustics has achieved here. Okay. And the kicker, sorry, just to be clear on it, and I think this is something where you will relate to. The kicker is that cabinet. It is just extraordinarily inert, and there's that realization when you're running through a known test program that all of a sudden you're listening to your electronics and 6 perfectly integrated drivers in free space. There is absolutely no discernible cabinet coloration at all, and that's just crazy.
It's good to see manufacturers actually taking that on board nowadays and trying to make stuff as resonant free as possible, and using different types of materials. We've seen different approaches from different manufacturers. I mean, M&K now use tar between 2 layers of MDF to isolate it. It's kind of similar to what Q Acoustics are doing. Same principles, just different materials and so on. I've got to ask you, Ed, if it was £4,000 of your own money, would you buy them?
This is where it gets interesting. This speaker is objectively perfect. And if I was being mature and responsible, and actually if I was thinking with my head rather than my heart, these are the speakers I should buy, not least because they are just, as well as being devastatingly good, they're incredibly forgiving as well. The only catch is, in the next couple of months, I'm going to be looking at another pair of loudspeakers which cost the peculiarly specific sum of £11.99 more than the Q Acoustics. And I suspect that, again, objectively, they won't be as good, but they probably, tugging at the heartstrings, might be the ones I'd go for. Unlike, as I specified in the conclusions, unlike when you guys do the televisions and you can point to a whole raft of objective measurements that you've taken and say, this is the best. This is unquestionably the most accurate, coloration-free, distortion-free loudspeaker that I've encountered at this sort of price point. But obviously there's a bit more subjectivity to stereo music listening. I have given this thing a reference badge because it's probably the best thing we're going to see under £5,000. But I could fully understand if when it was your money, you possibly went for something which isn't as technically accomplished, but might just pull at your emotions a bit more effectively.
Yeah, audio is emotion.
Yes,
it's pure and simple. It's emotion, and it's what pulls at your heartstrings. It's what sound that you like. I mean, there are no standards there. There's standards as to where you place speakers and best practice and all that kind of thing. But there are no standards. I mean, recording studios record on different mixing desks. Some people will go to certain studios because they like the sound of a certain mixing desk in a certain studio in a certain part of the world, and you can't get any consistency across audio, and I think it'd be dead boring if it was. It's not like video where you can get consistency. You can still add artistic approach, but you have this starting point where everybody starts at the same point. It's not the same with audio. So yeah, it's completely emotional. It's completely unscientific. I mean, you can measure these things, but the measurements they never really
it's going to tell you as much a story of your room as it is anything else. But
there is that. I mean, even if you did it in an anechoic chamber, it measures that, but it's not going to measure that in real life. It's not going to measure that in a real room. It's gonna respond differently and all the rest of it. So yes, it is a bit of a minefield when it comes to audio, and it's definitely a lot more emotional. And you can see why people do take a certain points of view when it comes to audio, because they will have strong preferences each way. Anyway, we all know that if you had £4,000, you'd go and buy a second-hand Volvo 940, wouldn't you?
Well, there's always a possibility. But all I would say is that the reason I awarded the score and the badge I did to these speakers is that more than anything else, the other thing is that these are all things to all people. They're much less likely than any other speaker at the price to turn off somebody, more specifically than appealing to them. They do so little wrong. I cannot see under any conditions how you'd hate them.
Yeah.
If we're dealing in the subjective, they are just so capable and as I keep saying, so forgiving as well. You don't just have to feed them immaculate, yet another version of bloody Brothers in Arms. You can play what the hell you like on them. They have staggering bass response, and then if you do want to actually listen to something pretty much as it came off the desk, then they're perfectly capable of doing that. It's a real achievement from Q Acoustics, and I think that they will cast a shadow on what a couple of other brands get up to now, because think products like this, and we see this in other categories as well, they just have that upsetting effect. They disturb the status quo, and they compel people to put more effort in and try a bit harder, and that's always got to be a good thing.
Yeah, I'm interested to try and get a listen to these at some point. Certainly piqued my interest, Ed, and it's a kind of product I like, where it's neutral and it doesn't cast its own signature on things. I quite like products like that.
I imagine that those and the Lingdorf.
Yeah, that's just what I was thinking.
You'd be looking at staggering levels of what you hear is what you get. So that would be very intriguing, actually.
Totally. So those reviews are up there. The Lingdorf reviews up there. The Concept 500 reviews are up on AVForums as well. If you can't find them on the homepage, if you use the menu, drop down and go to Hi-Fi, you'll be able to find them there. So let's move on. It is the biggest gaming show of the year. I have to say it's passed me by this year, because in the past we have done some coverage of it, but we haven't done so the last couple of years. So I completely forgot it was on, Mark, but some interesting announcements at this year's E3.
Yes, I guess the biggest one from a kind of tech point of view would be the Xbox One X, which was previously the Xbox One Scorpio, and it's coming up a fairly hefty price. It'll be £449, coming out November the 7th, and it's very much touted as their answer to the PlayStation 4 Pro, but it's more powerful, so they're pushing this idea of true 4K, that kind of thing. It's very impressive engineering feat in terms of its overall size. It's even smaller than the Xbox One S. It will offer all the things that you'd expect. Even if you've got just a regular 1080p TV, downsampling will make everything look better, because of it's like having the best version of anti-aliasing you can get. But it's an interesting prospect in the fact that the question is raised: who's the market for this? Is it worth £100 more than PS4 Pro? considering also what deals might be available for that even around November. There are deals available now. But of course, it will have the UHD drive, so that kind of differentiates itself slightly. And with regards 4K, you also have to look into the fact that it will be up to developers. So some titles will be 4K. There will be some will use checkerboard rendering, which people often prefer because it means that you can kind of free up a little bit of extra horsepower to be able to have higher settings elsewhere. But yeah, it seems very well engineered, and so it's kind of adding to Microsoft's whole approach, which is this kind of stratified series of consoles out there, and the idea that everything plays on everything. And I guess the big kind of announcement to go with that with games, well, for someone like me who's still got a few of the games lying around, is they're bringing the original Xbox games to it via backwards compatibility. So they really are trying to kind of create this idea that I think they're looking to.
Did I not read somewhere, Mark, that actually when you make that available, people don't use it? Backwards compatibility. I'm sure I read somewhere that one of the consoles, they did some research and found that there was a very, very small percentage of users actually used the backwards compatibility of it.
Yes, yeah, the kind of usage stats aren't great. This was, with the Xbox One. It seems like it's the kind of thing that everybody asks for, and everybody wants it because it represents good value to them. It means that
a bit like 3D on TV. Yeah, it's.
Yeah, well, everybody, better to have it and not use it. And so people think that when it's not there, they almost feel like something is taken away from them. They feel like, there's something that should be there. But Microsoft have worked incredibly hard to, get these titles working because it's, basically via emulation. But they will be working in the sense that you put the disc in and then you will be playing, an emulated version of that. It's not like the machine contains the original chipset and everything from the original console. So they've worked incredibly hard, and it seems like they're going to be working even harder for a feature that, the question is how much are people going to be using this? But it at least points towards a slight difference to Sony's approach. So, with perhaps Microsoft, it is going more towards games as a service, that kind of thing, that you will have this stratified series of boxes in the future that play everything, and perhaps just it plays them all just at different settings depending on what you want. Again, I'm not entirely sure who's going out for this at £449, but if for some reason you still had a PlayStation 4 or a launch Xbox One, you wanted 4K gaming, but you were also desperate to get a UHD Blu-ray player, then this ticks the boxes. Whereas that's still the oversight with the PlayStation 4 Pro. A lot of people still feel like that should have just had the UHD Blu-ray drive in it.
Another thing for me, Mark, and this is just going on consoles that I've used in the past. I don't have any of the new gen consoles here, but what are they like for noise? Because if you're putting a UHD drive in and somebody's thinking about putting that into their main system, what are they like for fan noise and overheating? Because I'm looking at the publicity photographs at the minute for the Xbox One X, and I can't see any ventilation.
Well, the thing is, it very much depends. It's all kind of anecdotal evidence. This is the problem with a lot of the consoles, is particularly with the launch ones. Some people would get quiet ones, some people wouldn't. I've heard a lot of people complain about launch PS4s. Mine's absolutely fine. My kind of launch Xbox One is absolutely whisper quiet. I can barely tell it's on. And so it's very much kind of anecdotal evidence because everybody's got them in different racks. Everybody's got a different amount of ventilation around them. But in general, in comparison to where we've been in the past, I think overall they're a hell of a lot quieter. The issue some people have though is when they're under kind of heavy load or particular games. They find everybody uses terms like it sounds like a hairdryer in the room or a jet taking off or something like that. In general, it's like anything else that you've got that kind of heats up, that has a fan in it. You want to make sure that it's well ventilated and you don't allow little dust bunnies to get around it.
What's your PlayStation's like? Because you've just updated, haven't you, Steve?
Got the PS4 Pro now. PS4 actually I thought was quite noisy, but you're right, Mark. Different people seem to have different interpretations of what they consider noisy. I do think it is a valid point, though, Phil, that if you're buying, well, I was going to say if you're going to buy an Xbox One S or Xbox X as an alternative to buying a standalone Blu-ray player, Ultra HD Blu-ray player, I was going to say it's a cheaper option, but obviously it isn't a cheaper option if you're buying the Xbox X, because you can get standalone players now for a lot less than that, not less than 449 quid. Obviously, you won't get the games console included. So if you want both together, it seems that's the only option you've got. If you're looking at it as a cheap version, a cheap way of getting a hold of an Ultra HD Blu-ray player, I think if that's your main reason for buying it, you're better off just getting a standalone player, because there are some really good players.
The prices are so low now.
Yeah,
you're better just jumping in with a player. But I was looking at the Xbox One X as a media center, because I'm assuming that you can get all the catch-up services and everything else is all in here, Mark, and you could actually use it as a media center, as a games console, as a UHD Blu-ray player, and so on. But my concern is I'm looking at, and maybe I'm missing it, but I'm looking at this and there doesn't seem to be any obvious venting for cooling, and these things do run hot.
This was, I mean, I'm fairly sure that, I don't want to kind of speak glibly about this in case there are any issues after kind of Microsoft's red ring of death with the Xbox 360, but this has been an absolute prime concern about Microsoft's from the get-go with the Xbox One. Trying to make sure if they were pushing it as a media center, as your box that you run everything through, that, keeping it cool and making sure that it could remain on for long periods of time was their first concern. So, I'm fairly sure that would have been the first thing they looked at there. They're not going to create, touch wood, but I really can't see them creating another box that overheats in the same fashion, simply because they received such flack for that. And it does seem surprising. It does look such a small box for what they're packing in there. Particularly, I think has it got the power adapter in there as well? I'm not sure about that.
I can't see that from I'm just looking at PR photos.
Yeah, they don't tend to show it if there's a huge power brick, but I don't know if they've got that in there as well. But you would assume the size of the box that's probably outside. But I can't see it being a major issue, to be honest. They're not gonna. That's not gonna be the kind of oversight they make. I don't think.
You gonna buy one?
No, no.
You had to think of that.
No. Well, it's because, to be honest, my next purchase, I still haven't got a 4K TV. So that's why I'm shall we say, looking forward to what's coming up on the running order after this, because I want to pick Steve's brains perhaps after the podcast.
Yeah, I think that might be quite beneficial. We're coming on to that right now. So we're not going to go through the reviews, Steve, because obviously the reviews are up there, and it looks like a lot of people have read them so far, so they'll be up to speed with what you've said in the reviews. I guess that the first question I'm going to ask is E7 or B7, if it was your own money, would you buy them? And which one? Right.
Okay. E7, B7. So LG have publicly said at the beginning of the year that there was no difference between any of the models. So B right up to W, they're all the same panel, the same system on chip, the same image performance. And the differences between those various models are largely cosmetic, in the sense that, the E7 has the built-in soundbar and the picture-on-glass design, which is, I've got to say, absolutely gorgeous. Don't get me wrong, lovely. And so the B7 and the E7 don't have that. They just have normal built-in speakers. The B has its kind of curve stand, and the C has a slope stand. But it's all just cosmetic. Obviously, the W is the wallpaper one you hang on the wall, and everything else is contained in a separate unit. And having had the E7 and the B7 at the same time and able to compare them and set them up correctly and test them all, I can vouch for the fact that there is no difference in terms of performance. They are identical. Any differences were almost certainly down to panel variations rather than any actual fundamental difference between the TVs. So that does mean that if you're going to buy one or the other, your decision has to come down to, factors like, do I want a built-in soundbar, or do I like the picture on glass design and would I rather have that? And is it therefore worth an extra 500 quid? Do I want the slightly nicer remote control? That kind of stuff. In terms of pure performance terms, you really just, there is no difference. So if it was my money, I'd definitely go for the B7 because I think the picture performance is fantastic. I think it's got absolutely everything you could want in a TV. If you just go down through, I mean, they have been accused in the past of ticking boxes, but let's be honest, consumers tick boxes now. I'm ticking my boxes. It's OLED, it supports 4K, HDR, every single version of HDR you can think of.
Dolby Vision. Dolby Vision.
Yep, Dolby Vision. Well, that's what I mean. It's got everything. It's got HDR10, Dolby Vision, HLG, and even Technicolor, although no one uses that currently. So you've got all that in there. You've even got Dolby Atmos support. I mean, admittedly, that is a bit more. It does work a little bit because we actually experience it when we feel it in demos. It does create a slightly more immersive experience. But at the end of the day, the sound quality on the B7 is not great. So, I would definitely be using it with a separate sound system. So, if you don't want to do that and you want a built-in soundbar, then you're looking at the E7 as an alternative. But you've got the WebOS system, which is fantastic. You've got every single video catcher service you can think of. Now TV's in there, Amazon, Netflix, all the catch-up services. We've got Preview Play, the lot. It's all in there. All works really well.
Is the B7 then kind of suitable upgrade over the B6? Have they kind of rectified any issues? In
my opinion, yes, it is. It's an upgrade for a number of reasons. First of all, much lower input lag, which would be good news for you. 21 milliseconds, so that's really low. It's got a different system on chip. It's got improvements made in terms of performance just above black. Also, in terms of there was some macro blocking in the image on the B6, which isn't apparent on the B7. I think it's just a more refined.
Question also. Sorry, there was an issue with the B6. I know some people complained about automatic brightness limiter and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's higher. It's still got that, but it kicks in at a higher level now. So you get a brighter full screen image, particularly on standard dynamic range content. Also has better color accuracy too, because they're using improved 3D lookup tables on the new generation of TV. So yeah, I think there's a lot of people will look at the prices and say, well, I can get the B6 for half the price of a B7, and that is true. And if you're tight for cash, the B6 is still a really good TV to get. But if you can afford it, the B7, for me, the B7 is a sweet spot. It absolutely nails it in terms of performance, features, design, and price.
Did it pass? Did it pass the Laura test?
Yes, she actually thought it was very attractive. She thought they were both actually. To be fair, she thought they were both very attractive TVs, but she did like the B7. She thought that's very nice too, because it is. I mean, it's in there. I like the curved stand. I like the styling of it. It's super slim. It's a little bit wider at the bottom, obviously, where the speakers and things are. But it is a very attractive TV, and there's no question that the OLED does have a certain wow factor because it's so thin. And obviously, the other thing good for me is that you're moving them around quite a lot. They're a lot lighter. trying to move the Kuro back into position after it gone was backbreaking.
That Kuro weighs an absolute ton. I had to shift it. The old one here, I don't use it anymore, but I have to shift it around now and again. And oh Jesus, talk about it. They must have had poured concrete inside them down the bottom because. Anyway, the important thing here as well, I think, Steve, that we need to address is that quite a number of people have been saying on the forums that we're getting hand-picked samples and all the rest of it from manufacturers. This is absolute rubbish. That practice does not go on because it would do the manufacturers more harm than good if we cottoned on to the fact and then made it public and we were able to show that through objective measurements and everything else. So for the LG OLEDs, we actually got the B7 from Richer Sounds, and we want to thank Richer Sounds for helping us with the reviews and providing us with a retail sample. It came out of their stock, out of their main stock room, to Steve's house, and then it went back again when we were finished with it. Thanks to Richer Sounds for doing that. But it allowed us to put them side by side, Steve, because the E7 came directly from LG's PR company. So it came from their sample pool of review TVs. There was no difference between them. Any differences, you're talking single percentage point differences, which you would get from panel to panel anyway because of the slight differences and tolerances that we're talking about in a mass consumer, mass market, mass produced product. So these accusations of hand-picked samples and all the rest of it is utter rubbish. And on the back of that, the good news is that LG have managed to make some pretty big steps forward when it comes to accuracy out of the box, which is not going to be very good news to certain professional calibrators out there, but certainly for the end consumer, it's great news, Steve.
I think there's been a general push across all the manufacturers to deliver more accurate out-of-the-box settings on their TVs. This year has been particularly impressive. We've seen some really accurate out-of-the-box performances. And like you say, the B7 was a retail sample, and it was very accurate out of the box. Minor tweaks here and there, but the color accuracy, as I said a minute ago, has also been improved, and that's really, really good out of the box. And that's just as well because the CMS doesn't particularly work well on LG TVs. But you don't really need to use it once you calibrated the grayscale. You've got a really accurate color performance anyway.
But you don't.
And in fact,
but what we're saying is you don't even need to do that, because what you're talking about here, Steve, is even though you could do the calibration and correct the grayscale slightly, but the fact is that 90% of viewers looking at that out of the box picture wouldn't know, and wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
Any errors are below the the level of human perception, or very close to the limit. So you wouldn't be able to see a difference unless you were doing a direct comparison.
Yeah, and I think this is an important point to make, because it's the nature of forums that people are going to nitpick. They're going to go over reviews. They're going to look at charts. They're going to look at what's said in reviews, and sometimes misread or misinterpret what's being said. And I think the important point to make here is that these sets are so good out of the box that unless you have a calibrated reference monitor sitting next to it, 90% of the time with these out of the box settings, you wouldn't notice the difference.
Yeah, definitely. I guess so. To answer your question, would I choose the B7 or the E7? I would choose the B7. Another interesting question that gets asked a lot is, given the E7's price point, that's obviously targeted to compete directly with the A1 from Sony and the EZ952 from... Actually, I think the EZ952 might sit somewhere between the B7 and the E7 in terms of pricing, but certainly we've seen the EZ1002, which is obviously quite a lot more expensive than the A1 and the E7. But, which would you choose out of those three? And I think that largely comes down to personal preference. It's a bit like Ed's comments earlier about what speakers he would buy. I think performance-wise, they're all using the same LG display panels. They all have the same basic peak brightnesses. The implementation of tone mapping may be slightly different from manufacturer to manufacturer because there are those sort of agreed set of standards at the moment, but they all deliver a very similar performance with HDR. Their color accuracies and out-of-the-box performances are, as we've said, all very similar too. I think the area perhaps where there's a lot of debate, and I know we've talked about it before in previous podcasts, is that I think Sony are particularly good with things like motion handling, and there's their own processing involved there, and it is very good. But ultimately, if you look at the three TVs, really it comes down to personal preference. I personally, I think would go for the E7 because I think it is genuinely gorgeous, and I love WebOS, and I think it's a solid, stable platform, and I think it's got everything you need. And as you've mentioned a minute ago, Phil, it's got Dolby Vision. I think the Panasonics are going to struggle because of that. I think their lack of Dolby Vision support is going to bite them this year to a degree.
And we're not saying that on a performance level at all, but
no,
you're talking about ticking boxes, and consumers do that. Absolutely. They tick boxes.
I also don't think that...
I have to be honest.
You go Sony. Okay, you go Sony. It's gorgeous. I'm not totally sold on the whole tilt thing, but it is a gorgeous TV. The acoustic surface thing is amazing. I love that. It's beautifully made and designed. It's classic Sony. It looks gorgeous. It's got a great picture. Accuracy is really good. The one thing that put me off, I absolutely hate the Android smart TV platform. I can't stand it.
I don't use the bits and bobs that much, I guess. So it's just, as I say, the Sony, it's a lot. It's an extra amount to be paying for design, and sometimes that's a bit of a weird one. But it appeals to me as being, given that they are, as we pointed out, they're working with perhaps the same basic ingredients. I just like the fact that they've managed to just do something a little bit different with it, and the result is a screen that looks properly smart. I mean, with the E7, the idea is like, hooray! I get a sound bar. Whoa, that's the screen itself looks fantastic, but I don't want to pay any money for sound.
Obviously, it's different. It's different for different people, and I think the main thing here that we're trying to get across is that performance generally across most of the OLED screens now, and even including the Philips, which we haven't mentioned here, Steve, but which is still on the market.
And that's a cracking tally, by the way. Really, really good. I mean, it suffered a little bit, and that's my fault, really, but I didn't realise this. Obviously, because it was meant to come out last year, it ended up coming out at the end of last year, beginning of this year, and it didn't have 3D, and it got sort of criticised for that time. Of course, we didn't realise when I was doing the review that suddenly everyone had dropped it, and that no longer was an issue. But performance-wise, it doesn't have Dolby Vision again, which might work against it, but performance-wise, it was a cracking OLED TV.
Yeah, and there's no such thing as golden samples and hand-picked samples and all the rest of it. I just want to make that point because I'm sick of reading it in the threads. And I know people are genuinely concerned that what we're reviewing is what they buy in the shops. Well, hopefully we've put some minds at rest because, we've sourced a retail sample in the B7. We will continue to work with the likes of Richer Sounds and get them to send us, now and again, get them to send us retail samples so we can just double check. And of course, you're out in the field, Steve, you do calibration work.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, Phil, that people have been a few comments about, banding or vignetting on OLED TVs. And I haven't seen any vignetting on a TV in over 2 years. And that includes ones I reviewed or ones I've calibrated out in the wild. Banding, however, is still I'm going to say less of an issue, but it is there. If you put up like a 1 to 5% test pattern and just above black, you will see this banding.
But it's there. It's there on every TV, though, Steve.
Every
isn't it?
single yes, exactly what I'm saying. It's on every single panel, and the chances are you won't see it with normal content. But again, like I said earlier, there are panel variations. There was some more obvious band. There was more obvious banding actually, funny enough, on the A1 and the Panasonic than there was on the E7 and the B7. That's just the way it happened to be. But it's going to vary from panel to panel. I don't necessarily think it's going to vary from manufacturer to manufacturer because they're all getting their panels from the same place. But whether you're going to notice it is I mean, it's like anything. If you do have it and you notice it, then it's going to annoy you. If you don't notice it, you don't care. But it is very minor, and I don't think it's an issue. But there are obviously going to be 40 units, and some people are going to get a duffer. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're all duff. So my experience has certainly been that the quality control has been extremely good in the last couple of years. Yeah,
and again, we've discussed this in the past on previous podcasts, Steve, that there has to be expectation levels on a mass-produced product. Like you say, there are variances there. They're normally in the single percentage point variances, but there are variances there. Like you say, you are going to get the odd Friday afternoon build, which happens in any production line. You're going to get issues maybe with certain batches that have a component that does something it's not supposed to do. But these things are built in batches, and if that happens, then it happens. This points to mass-produced products. It's nothing personal to the person that buys that product. You're going to get a duffer now and again. It's just the way the world works, and it's the way that mass-produced products are made. And people will point the fingers and say, well, they should be calibrated out of the factory, and the quality control should be spot on, and all the rest of it. And I would agree, but that adds costs. And in today's
that's you end up with an EZ1002, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. And then these times where money's tight for everybody, it's especially manufacturers who are trying to make a living making TVs. Sometimes the quality control's not there because they haven't got the resources to do it. So, that just happens with mass-produced products. And I think there is this expectation level that everything should be perfect. Well, you ain't going to get anything perfect that's mass-produced. If you want something perfect, you can go and buy an 11-inch Sony OLED for the studio. It'll cost you £39,000. That has been checked thoroughly all the way down the production line because it costs 40 grand. You're talking about TVs that cost, and it's a lot of money to people, 4 or 5 grand. But you've got to remember that these are TVs that cost 4 or 5 grand. They're not going to be in the same ballpark as something that costs 40 grand. And they have to make money out of these things as well, and making money out of TVs is extremely tight. So you're going to have these differences, and there's not a lot you can do about it other than complaining to your retailer and changing for another TV if you do happen to have an issue. And this banding, Steve, it's to do with the panels and how the panels are manufactured. So until they come up with another way of manufacturing the panels, it's always going to be there. It's just a case of you're never going to see it unless you're the type of person that sits down with 2, 3, 4, 5% windows to check.
Yeah, I also think it's a lot less obvious than it was in the past. So I think they're getting better and improving it. But let's be honest here. What would you rather have? A bit of banding just above black, or would you rather have a cloudy backlight, haloing from local dimming systems, and all the other problems that you constantly see on LCD TVs? I know which one I'd rather go for. And all I can say is, looking at the various OLEDs available in the marketplace, you can pick up a B7 for £2,999, and when you look at the features it's got, all the boxes it ticks, the performance, the design, the smart platform, the input lag, it's hard to fault that TV. I really, for that kind of money, I can't fault it. And,
okay, another thing that's brought up, Stephen, we'll just touch on it for 2 minutes to take us up to 50-minute mark. Motion. A lot of things being raised on the forums about motion, the sample and hold technology that LCD uses and OLED uses, although I've got to say OLED uses it damn sight better than LCD does.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on motion?
Yeah, the thing about motion is a couple of factors here. One is obviously every manufacturer might implement it in different ways, and they do, and some are better than others. And I think we've mentioned on a number of podcasts that I believe, and Mark also agreed with me, that Sony are particularly good when it comes to that. But also, everyone perceives motion differently. So what one person might think is annoying, other people don't care about. Also, there are obviously, Phil, if something's shot at 24 frames a second, there's going to be inherent judgment in there because that's just the way that it was created.
Yeah, there's the lost start of the camera pan is usually the main suspect there.
Yeah, and so, yes, you can do things to mitigate things like that by using frame interpolation features on TVs, but they'll make it overly smooth, and then it stops looking like film. And so we always say, if you're watching film-based content, be it a movie or a TV drama, I generally recommend don't use any kind of frame interpolation feature because that will make it look more like video and ruin that whole effect.
One technology that does work, Steve, is BFI. So let's mention that right now. Black frame insertion. It works, but there's issues with OLED.
There's a couple of things. First of all, Sony do a thing called True Cinema, which is actually quite good because that just repeats the frame rather than actually interpolates it, which I think creates quite a nice effect when watching films. Black frame insertion, which is being used by Sony and Panasonic, actually inserts a black frame within the other frames, and it does result in better motion. But, and this is important, it makes the image a lot dimmer because you're inserting a black frame in there, so the image is a lot dimmer. Now, that's not an issue with an LCD where you've got a shed load of brightness. It's a big issue with OLED where they aren't as bright as. Now, it's not really an issue with standard dynamic range content, but it's a big issue with HDR where you're pushing those panels to the very limits of their brightness to get the best HDR experience. If you put a black frame in there, you're going to bugger that right up. Secondly, it's worth remembering that some people, and I've experienced this myself, if you put those black frames in there, you can see flicker. And it can be a big problem for people who they suddenly start seeing flicker on a black frame insertion. It's not a magic bullet. It's not going to fix everything.
It's funny how it works as well because on a Sony projector, I see flicker. You put True Cinema on, I can see it flickering. Do it on the Sony TV, I can't see it.
I was the other way around. Didn't see it on the projectors, but could see it on the A1.
There you go. Isn't it funny how that works for people?
So yes, like I said, motion is very, very dependent on the individual. I know Mark has problems with black frame insertion as well from flicker from that. He also had the same problems with 3D with the flicker. For the same reason, you're manipulating the image, and some people will see it differently to others. So there is no magic bullet, and there is no simple solution, and every approach has benefits and disadvantages.
The other thing I was going to mention there as well is a lot of people obviously looking to the past with rose tinted specs and CRT and plasma. I could see rainbow effect on a plasma.
Yep, my friend of mine sees it on plasmas.
Yeah. So again, even different technologies will affect different people. Whereas I don't get rainbow effect on a DLP unless it's a really slow color wheel. I don't tend to see it unless I move my head quickly or I try and provoke it to do it. So it is strange how each individual and we were talking about motion interpolation and that kind of thing. I can tell straight away if
instantly, even if it's the tiniest amount.
Yeah,
I can instantly tell that's being manipulated.
And that's just because we watch so much material at 24 frames and 25 frames that you can see it straight away. But yeah, it comes down to personal.
And some people don't mind that. Some people will happily watch a film with frame interpolation and they think it looks great. Particularly, I think young people who maybe grew up playing video games, it's less of an issue for them. But for me, I will not watch a film.
I'll give you a good example, and this is one that people can go away and experiment with and come back and mention in the comments and so on. Grab your Star Trek Blu-ray or 4K Blu-ray, the reboot, the first film, shove your frame interpolation on high and watch the bridge scenes, and then switch it off and watch it again without the frame interpolation. It's hilarious.
Yeah, I just for me it's just it goes against everything I believe in. But I know other people who will happily, and the same thing we had the same thing with The Hobbit in 48 frames a second. It was like the most excruciating experience of my life sitting through that. But other people loved it, thought it was great. So
yeah, I was there as well. Right.
And I've done the same thing with Billy Lynn on Ultra HD Blu-ray, of course. That's a 60 frames a second, and it looks like video. Expensive, well made video. So
okay, so we've got some more OLEDs turning up. We're not finished with them yet for this year.
No, not yet.
So there's another one turning up this week. We won't tell you what it is just yet. We'll leave that surprise for it to appear on the homepage. So keep your eyes on the homepage this coming week. Right, let's move on. We spent enough time on hardware. Coming up next is movie news. Right, so it's the summer months, and this is where I get my value out of my unlimited card, because I tend to go to the cinema in the summer. Good air conditioning, Steve. Far better than sitting next to hot computers and all the rest of it. So I've been to see a couple of films recently. So I'll quickly mention Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. We did review it a few weeks back on the podcast. I finally got around to seeing it. First 5 minutes of the film is inspired. It is absolutely brilliant. I have not laughed as much at the beginning of a film as I did to that. So if people haven't seen it yet, I'm not going to spoil it, but the first 5 minutes, whoever came up with that, high five. It was brilliant. I've got to say, the rest of the film lived up to expectations. The only thing for me was I thought they were a bit heavy at the end, heavy-handed at the end with the trying to get people to cry. And I know you would cry like a baby, Steve, just at anything.
They got Withers to cry, but
Yeah.
to be fair,
that's no
that's
great
a low
achievement.
benchmark.
It was just, I thought they spent too long on it. I mean, fair enough, do your soppy bit, but it was just, I thought it started to grate on me a little bit. And I've got to say, the end credits, again, inspired. Really good.
Yeah.
Sat all the way through that and had a good chuckle. The only other thing I thought was it's a perfect movie for Father's Day. That's all I'll say. I thought that theme was run a little bit too thick as well, Steve. About fathers and sons and that kind of thing.
Well, I mean, that was the conceit of the film, wasn't it? I mean, they set up that aspect in the first film, and they delivered in this film in terms of Peter Quill's parentage.
Yeah, who's your daddy? So yeah, 8 out of 10 for me. And I think I gave the original 8 out of 10 as well. So just as good as the original movie. I'm glad they moved it on. I'm glad it worked for a second time, because sometimes you get lightning in a bottle, and the second time out it's not as great. So yeah, worked for me. Right, one that we both saw. Moving on. It was out this week as well, so Steve's going to give a bit of a longer review than I am, because for me, I did not enjoy it. And I haven't spoken to Steve about this yet, so I don't know if he's enjoyed it either. But The Mummy, what I thought was, it was basically a Tom Cruise action vehicle movie. It desperately wants to kickstart a monster franchise, a Universal Monsters franchise, Steve. That was just so obvious right from the beginning.
They call it because it's called their Dark Universe.
Exactly. As soon as that credits come up, you think, oh well, we know what's happening here. I mean, Tom Cruise is heading it up, big name. He's going to draw box office. It's going to get box office, even though it's in my opinion a poor movie. People are going to go and see it because Tom Cruise's name's attached to it, because Russell Crowe's name's attached to it as well. So it's going to create interest there. But I just thought it was dull. It was insipid. The thing for me was the Brendan Fraser movies were never great, but they were entertaining and they were characterful and there was humour. There was humour and there was a bit of charm about them, and it was played tongue in cheek. Very much tongue in cheek, but it was good fun, like a good Bond is good fun, that kind of thing. It was just, there wasn't an ounce of humour or charm, or it felt like it was holding back the whole time through the film. To me, it felt like it was holding back. It outstayed its welcome. I was looking at my watch, thinking, "Come on, it's only 5 minutes has elapsed here." It felt like a lifetime. Move it on. And some people might call it harmless popcorn fodder, but I think that'd be insulting to the popcorn. I really do. For me, it was a 3 out of 10. It's probably the poorest movie I've seen in some time, and that's surprising with the names attached to it. But it didn't really know what it wanted to be. It started off as a sort of, I don't know, adventure type, Indiana Jones, archaeology, that type of thing. Trophy hunting, that kind of thing. And then it moved to Mission Impossible type action.
That plane crash was quite cool.
It was. I'll give the effects. They were cool, but it's what you expect from a cruise-led movie. You know what I mean? You kind of say the action wasn't great. When the action appeared on screen, it was well choreographed and it worked. It just felt like there was something completely missing, and I think it was a soul. If you want to stay on the subject of the film, it had no soul.
No.
It was really hollow. And even for me, I mean, sometimes I'm happy just to sit back and enjoy it just for the spectacle. But there wasn't much spectacle to it either. You've seen all this before. You've seen the stunts before. You've seen the plot devices before. You knew every time there was going to be a loud bang, or you knew it was coming because they just stayed with the same tropes that a lot of these movies do, and really disappointing. When you consider the amount of talent behind it, 3 out of 10 is not great.
I think they needed to concentrate on telling a decent story and not worry about, it was so obvious that they were trying to set up this dark universe.
Exactly, yeah.
Which, by the way, they've already tried once before, because Dracula Untold was meant to kickstart a new Monsters franchise, but failed. Now they're trying it again and saying, "Oh, Dracula Untold isn't part of this. This is not part of this now." It's like, okay, so they drop lots of bits and pieces in. But what they should have done is just create a. I mean, first of all, I don't think anyone was crying out for another Mummy movie, to be perfectly honest.
Well, no, I mean, the Brendan Fraser stuff was really good.
They weren't that long ago, right?
They weren't that long ago. When you say that, it was 20 years ago, but...
Well, the first one was, but there was one, the most recent one was probably only about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So...
But that's what they were, though. They were fun, tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah.
And, the entertaining. This was not entertaining in any way.
Yeah, you need to start by telling a good story and making an interesting film. And then if you want to seed little bits of stuff for a wider universe into it, fine. Because everyone's looking at Marvel and going, we want a bit of what they've got. But it's a very different thing. First of all, Marvel have created their cinematic universe very cleverly. They started with Iron Man, and Iron Man is a standalone film. Yes, there are little nods here and there. Right at the very end, they have Nick Fury turn up to talk about S.H.I.E.L.D., but basically, it was a standalone movie. It was well made, it was entertaining, and it really worked. And they used that as a starting point for their cinematic universe. But they've obviously also got decades and decades and decades of comic book stories that they can draw on to create this cinematic universe. I don't think there's that much wealth of story in the Universal monsters to warrant a cinematic universe, is there? I mean, how many times have we seen a Dracula film or a Frankenstein film or a Mummy film retelling the same thing over and over again?
Yeah, I mean, if you were a studio executive, it kind of makes sense to you because you look at Marvel and you look at your back catalogue if you're Universal and you think, oh, hey guys, we've got this whole monsters thing. Why don't we try and reboot that and reboot it for a modern audience and make it a bit more horror and so on, and which they tried to do. They tried to make this a bit darker, and I think that's where it fell flat on its face, because to have a dark film you need the black humour to go with it to balance it off, and there was none of that.
No.
There was not one joke where I laughed or even cracked a smile. It was so flat. It's unbelievable. I mean, I got more excitement, and I said this on my Facebook page, I had more excitement, thrills and scares driving the Mustang home in the rain after the film than I did sitting through the film.
Yeah, it smacks a little bit of desperation, and it's also bombed, so I think we might be seeing the end of their dark universe, although they are currently in production for a Frankenstein film with Javier Bardem, I think.
Do you know what Tom Cruise vehicle I'd like to see? I'd like to see a full spin-off film of his Tropic Thunder character.
Yeah.
I would watch the tits off that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Len Grossman.
Yeah.
Speaking of universes, Wonder Woman is an interesting alternative example, because I think Wonder Woman works because they've gone on with telling a story about Wonder Woman and not worried about trying to fit it in with everything else so much. I mean, there's little book-ending stuff at the beginning and end connected to Justice League, but basically they just got on with telling a Wonder Woman story, an origin story for her, and it really works. It's really well made. It's exciting, entertaining. It's got charm and humour.
I laughed more. I laughed more at that trailer playing beforehand than I did during all of the Mummy. So
no, it was really good. It's really good, Wonder Woman, and it's done really well. It's got great. I mean, it's interesting. I saw an article, and it's about Rotten Tomatoes and how studios are absolutely terrified now and are thinking about not doing advanced screenings of films just to critics, because The Mummy and Baywatch both got really, really, really bad scores on Rotten Tomatoes and have bombed. Wonder Woman's got massively high scores and it's doing way beyond expectations in terms of box office. But I think ultimately it's just the simple answer is if you want to do well, make good movies.
Yeah, exactly.
If a good film gets well reviewed, don't make shit films and then try and hide them from the public so you get your opening weekend. Make a decent movie. Wonder Woman is a good film. It's well made. It's got a great cast. It's got great effects. It's got a good story. It's got charm. It's got all the things that the Mummy hasn't, and that's why it's doing well. It's not because it got a high score on a particular website. So, Mummy was, by the way, speaking of Baywatch, yes, it's not a great film, but I actually did laugh quite a bit in it. It is quite funny in places.
I've decided that's going to be either a streaming service or a disc purchase for me. I don't think I could sit in the cinema. I think it's disappeared anyway as of next week. So
it hasn't done very well.
I don't think I'll get to see it.
It's a rare misfire for The Rock, I have to say, in terms of box office.
It was a trailer where I laughed out loud a number of times as well. So. Kind of shows you where my level of humour is. So you reckon Wonder Woman's worth me going?
I think Wonder Woman. I enjoy Wonder Woman. I really did enjoy it, and I'm not a big, I'm not really into Wonder Woman, or I'm not particularly into DC Comics, to be honest. And I haven't been particularly fond of their universe up till now, in terms of Justice League and that sort of stuff. But I thought it was a great movie. I thought Gal Gadot does the part really well. The supporting cast is really good. And it has a nice degree of charm, and it's really well done. And of the films that I've seen recently, those three movies particularly, Wonder Woman is the one I would recommend. It's worth seeing.
Good. Transformers the last night. I saw the trailer for this. I guess the trailers are about enough. I'm interested to see. Obviously, they shot a lot of the film up this way, where I live. Yeah. The castles and stuff up by Bamborough and so on. They used a lot of Northumberland locations and that kind of thing. So I'd be interested to see the location stuff that they've used. But how the mighty have fallen is what I would say with that
Anthony
one.
Hopkins.
Yeah. his narration through the trailer was wooden. Never mind the acting. So I think I'm going to avoid this one, Steve.
I'm going to go and see it. You know why I'm going to go and see it? I'm going to go and see it
because you like shit films and
No. I walked out of Dark of the Moon. I walked out of it, although I do own them all on Blu-ray. No, do you know what? This is a sad state of affairs, but going back to all the people who were complaining about, people who complained at me for not saying the fact that the B7 doesn't have 3D is a con when no TV's got 3D. So it's like, well, they've all got a con then, haven't they? But just give in to it, boys. Accept the fact that 3D is dead and shut up. But this is the only film this year, certainly only film this summer at least, actually shot with 3D cameras.
And
the
IMAX.
Only live action film.
IMAX 3D at that.
Cameras,
yeah.
So it will look fantastic. I'm sure it'll be absolute cobblers like all the other Transformers films. But it's the only one shot with 3D cameras. All the other stuff, all this so-called 3D stuff is all post-conversion. And some of that stuff, I mean, I don't know. I watched Resident Evil, the final chapter, and let's hope it is, because I watched it in 2D and Ultra HD Blu-ray, and it has got a cut every second almost. It was, I mean, I was struggling to watch it without, I think, going into an epileptic fit. It was almost unwatchable. And I thought, Jesus, what would that be like in 3D? That would just be, you'd be physically sick, I think, trying to watch that in 3D, because shooting in 3D with 3D cameras is a completely different way of shooting to just converting something in post-production into 3D. But anyway, Transformers the only 3D movie only real 3D movie this summer. So I'll probably go and see it in 3D for that reason.
Yeah,
but
you do it.
I'm not expecting much.
You do it so we don't have to.
My wife is off to see the Fireman Sam movie with the boy on Sunday.
That looks quite good.
It's got David Tennant in it.
Yeah.
Well,
it'll already be better than The Mummy then.
Well, to be honest, yes, this is probably the case. But no, that's obviously whilst I enjoy Father's Day watching a very long motor race. So I'm eternally grateful to that. Am I planning on going anywhere near cinema? Not if I can possibly help it. No. Yeah. I bought a big clutch of records again.
You do surprise me, Ed. I wouldn't know how to do for that.
But it's I don't want to mock it, and my wife is one of the many people that genuinely enjoys getting out to the cinema. It's just not really how I choose to unwind. It's got people in it, so it's most unpleasant.
I've got to say, for the first time in a long time, I was looking at my watch in the cinema, and I hate doing that because it just takes
What,
you
in
out.
the Mummy?
Yeah, it just takes you completely
I
out of
fell
the whole
asleep
thing.
twice.
Yeah.
Actually nodded off a couple of times.
Every 5 minutes, I had my phone out looking at the time and then checking Facebook, and that shows you how much interest.
Annoying everybody else in the cinema. by getting
Steve,
your phone
I
out.
was the only person in there.
Yeah, I must admit, there were only about 10 of us in the cinema when I saw The Mummy on Wednesday night. So I think that tells you what we need to know about its box office.
I mean, I hope nobody that employed at the Odeon Metro listens to this, but as soon as the film starts and nobody else is coming in, I'm straight into a premium seat, smack bang in the middle.
Yeah, obviously, everyone does it, don't they? Once the lights go down, just move. It's like musical chairs.
Yeah. Right, okay, so for people not going out to the cinema and who still purchase Blu-ray releases, what can they buy?
Well, we've got the Lego Batman movie, which I've got to say I'm quite looking forward to, because I really love the Lego movie.
Yeah.
It looks really funny in the trailers.
Oh,
and
you,
I think
you,
if
you didn't go to the cinema to see it, did you?
No, I haven't seen it. No.
Oh, it's brilliant.
Did you go and see it?
Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. You're going to love it. You're going to love it.
Yeah,
It's not as good as the original movie, because obviously you're just focusing on one character here, but you will like it. And the playoff with the Joker is superb. The humour is brilliant.
Right. Yeah. So I'm looking for that's obviously on Blu-ray and Ultra HD Blu-ray as well. So we've got that out. I think that's a no-brainer this week. Got Moonlight, obviously eventually won the Academy Award for Best Film, which I have not seen. A friend of mine saw it, said it was worthy and boring, and basically it was like Boyhood, but with 3 actors rather than the same guy growing up in the film. So Boyhood without the gimmick, and basically about a black gay guy rather than a white straight guy. I haven't seen it. I'm not that after hearing my friends' comments. Not that bothered about seeing it either. Aftermath, which is a film about with Arnie doing some acting actually, playing a grieving father after a plane crash. So I think not a laugh a minute, I think was the review. The review of it did say it was quite grim. We got Bird with the Crystal Plumage, which is 1970, I think, film from Dario Argento, early Italian horror, kind of Hitchcockian with a bit of gore in there, a bit of a classic, which has had a major reissue and restoration from Arrow. And also Criterion have got The Fisher King coming out, which I really like. It's Terry Gilliam with Jeff Bridges and what's his face?
Robin Williams.
Thank you, Robin Williams. Yes, the late great Robin Williams. So if you're a fan of that movie, I'm sure that would be great. Thanks to Criterion, and they're all coming out this week.
That will be a good disc. I might even go out and purchase that one. Criterion always do it. Yeah, they always do a nice package, Criterion, and it's a movie I quite like. So I think I'll go and get that one. What crap can we buy on Ultra HD Blu-ray, Steve?
Well, actually, it's less about new announcements as much as it is about what's been happening with Dolby Vision. We mentioned it talking about OLED and LG and how they support it, and so does Sony. And I think it's becoming much less of a hang on, less of a box ticking exercise, not tick boxing, tick boxing, a box ticking exercise. Because now it's a real thing. Now you've got players, well, at least there's one player so far, which is the UDP 203 and the UDP 205 from Oppo have been updated with firmware updates to Dolby Vision. LG will be updating their player at some point as well, so there'll be at least 3 players that can play Dolby Vision, and there are discs coming out. So the first discs have arrived, Despicable Me and Despicable Me 2. In the pipeline, we've also got Power Rangers, and I think The Fate of the Furious is also going to have
some classic titles there then.
Well, there'll be more, but this is the interesting thing. There's a lot of heavy rumours now, that now that there are TVs and players out there, Disney are going to start entering the market. They were waiting for Dolby Vision to become a real thing, and they're going to enter, and that their first disc will be Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 with Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos. So if that's true, I think that would be a massive boost for it. Disney start using it. Now, unfortunately, although I updated the Oppo, the discs didn't arrive until the OLEDs had gone back. So now I've got the discs. They arrived yesterday. The OLEDs are gone. So at the moment, I can't actually fully test.
Now, Steve, are you going to go and buy one?
What?
A B7.
Yeah.
I kind of thought you would. I'll tell you, if I had the cash at the minute, I'd go and buy one as well.
Yeah, I think I've reached the point. Every year I've had this. I'm sure we've all been. I mean, Mark, I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast. Now you want to get a new TV. Do I get one this year? Do I wait? What do I do? And each year I've thought about it, and I thought, now I'll wait because I don't need it. But I've reached a point now where I think, well, I really want an HDR TV. I really want Dolby Vision support, if only for checking discs and that sort of stuff. I really want an OLED. Yeah, and the B7 just ticks all the boxes, and I think it's competitively priced. So that's been my ultimate conclusion. And also, I tell you what, putting that Courier back up again after it had gone, it looked like what it was, a 9-year-old telly. It's still got a good picture, but it looked old-fashioned and really,
yeah, unfortunately. I mean,
are we now calling the Kuro retro now?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes. I think it's time to let it go. I really do. I think it's time. If people are still hanging on to their Kuros and so on, I think it's okay now. People, you can let go. Just let it slip away.
Like the end scene of Bigfoot and the Hendersons, you have to chase them away.
put a pillow over its head.
You'd need a bloody big pillow.
Oh, God, that pillow's
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
Yes, so I am going to buy B7. So when I do get it, I will obviously fully test Dolby Vision, comparing HDR10 to Dolby Vision and seeing what differences are, and going through all that. So look forward to that at some point in the near future.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up the podcast again on another celebrity death this year, and Adam West sadly passed away this past week. Now, he will be known to two different generations, Adam West. He'll be known to generations like Steve and myself, probably more Steve, as the 60s Batman, which was on syndication on British TV a hell of a lot during the 70s when I was growing up and so on. So I do remember it. I was going to say fondly, but I didn't. No, it wasn't fondly. It was.
I loved it.
Did you? No.
Yeah, but I mean, I didn't know any better.
The other generation that's going to know Adam West is Mayor Adam West from Family Guy, and again another inspired role there, and he played it for what it was, tongue in cheek. Sometimes some of the funniest lines in some of the episodes came from Mayor West, and
Nobody messes with Adam Wee.
So obviously known to, and he did a lot of other film work, TV work and that kind of thing, but those will be the two roles that he's best known for. And I've got to say, it might have been on syndication stuff. I can't remember much other than the campness and the silliness of the Batman that he played, Steve. I mean, obviously you were a bit older than me, so
Well, yeah, but I mean, I didn't read DC Comics as a kid. I did read some Marvel stuff like Spider-Man. I was a big fan of Spider-Man, but I never did. So I didn't know Batman as a comic book character. I only knew Batman from the TV series with Adam West and the movie. So as far as I was aware, Batman was silly camp with silly jokes and all them, and was played by a slightly weedy guy to not look remotely, Adam West. To me, Adam West was Batman. And when they announced they were doing a Batman movie in 89 or 88, 89 with Tim Burton, my immediate assumption was they were going to do a jokey comic book, jokey, silly camp Batman like the TV series that I was familiar with. I had no idea Batman was this dark, brooding character in the comics.
No,
when
you had to wait to was it Batman and Robin, the one that Joel Schumacher did?
Yeah, to get the old school. Yeah, because I had no idea about the comics, and I did actually buy after the whole Batman thing started to build up before it came out in 89. Obviously, when they cast Michael Keaton, who's a best known comedian at that point, I was thinking, oh, okay, so they're going for the comedy, it's going to be that. And then obviously that was not the film they made at all. And then I bought The Dark Knight Returns and read that, and realized, that Batman was a very different thing, and got actually quite into the actual comic book Batman. For me, for years and years, he was Batman to me, and Batman was that kind of campy, jokey style. I had no idea it was meant to be dark and brooding.
I don't know. There is a certain charm to it. I mean, you're right, Phil. It judged in an absolute critique sense, it's crap. But the fact that they had the bat everything, bats, shark repellent, and
one of the first toy cars I ever had, other than the James Bond Lotus Esprit and the DB5, was the Batmobile.
The Batmobile was super cool, wasn't it? It looked amazing.
Was brilliant.
Great.
Yes. What's not to like? And you're right. I mean, the Adam West, I think also, if you like, he accepted his typecasting with very good grace, and did a fabulous job with it. If anyone wanted a handle on the man, it's a popular thread on Reddit. It's not too hard to find, but if you ever seen it, his listings in the local phone directory. So it was like West Adam C Wayne Bruce, and then basically it just listed through all of them, never giving his number, but through Batman crime prevention services and so on and so forth. It was so he put some real thought and effort into it, and it was just lovely. And then as I say, some of his Family Guy stuff, was just wonderfully surrealistic and always blurred the lines between what you sort of expect from Adam West and what not to, which I thought was quite good as well.
Mr. Botwright?
Mark, still here?
Yeah. No, I really enjoyed the series. I've got to say, it pops up on Freeview occasionally, and I'll still watch an episode. It's enjoyably camp. It's completely hammy. I like the fight scenes. I like blam and kapow and that kind of thing.
Brilliant score. I love the score.
Yeah. Fantastic score. But I also like the fact that they bothered to get someone to play the Joker who refused to shave off their moustache as well. With Cesar Romero. You're playing the Joker, right? You've got to get rid of the moustache. No, the moustache stays, and they just went along with it, and it was
Put
just
makeup over it, didn't it?
Yeah, and that kind of summed it up. They didn't mind. The fact that nobody could find the Batcave, and it's just a bush that falls down, and the car drives past it. It was very kind of absurdist, and I actually think it stands up quite well now. Strangely enough,
of that, it's left a number of influences because of that sort of absurdism. Can I also say, as an aside, that the Adam West era Batgirl, Yvonne Craig, indisputably the hottest Batgirl there's ever been, may possibly there ever will be as well. So he had that going for him as well. Just as an aside.
And on that sexist bombshell, Ed, that is it for this week's AVForums podcast. We've gone over time yet again, but we have been away for 2 weeks, so we had a wee bit to get through. My thanks to Steve Withers.
How was I to know they'd have a can of shark-repellent bat spray handy?
Ed Selley.
Disposing of pre-atomic submarines to persons who don't even leave their full address.
And Mark Botwright.
The nobility of the almost human porpoise.
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, bookmark avforums.com for latest reviews, news and videos, and of course leave us your 5-star ratings on iTunes, but only if you enjoyed the show. But please do leave them, because it helps us climb up the charts and it helps other people find the podcast and join in. I'm Phil Hinton, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.